The smuggler's dangerous job. The dark alley was alive with whispers, the kind that made a man's skin crawl. A human smuggler, known only as Jace, leaned against the rough stone wall, his eyes scanning the shadows. He had made deals in this alley 100 times before, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with tension, and his gut told him something was about to go wrong. He glanced at his watch, impatient. The contact was late. Jace had been working in this line of work for years, but tonight, the stakes were higher than ever. A wealthy alien client had hired him to smuggle something, someone dangerous, someone who could make him a lot of money. But Jace wasn't one to ask questions. The less he knew, the safer he'd be. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, with a cloak that fluttered lightly in the wind, the figure moved with the grace of someone used to commanding attention. Jace's breath caught when he saw the face. It was not the usual type of client he worked with. This alien had a presence about her that made him stand still, almost in awe. Her skin shimmered with a soft golden hue, her eyes an eerie shade of violet that seemed to pierce right through him. "You're late," Jace said, trying to keep his voice steady, though a nervous edge crept in. The alien looked down at him, with a cool, almost bored expression. "Time is a luxury I don't often have," she replied. Her voice was smooth, calm, but something about it felt dangerous. "Who are you?" Jace asked, but as soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He wasn't supposed to ask. He wasn't supposed to care. It didn't matter who or what she was, just that she paid well. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small glowing device. Without a word, she handed it to him. Jace took it, his fingers brushing against her cold skin, and shivered slightly. "You'll take it to the coordinates I gave you." "There's a ship waiting," she said, her tone firm. Jace eyed the device, his mind racing. He knew better than to trust anyone in his line of work, but there was something about her, something that didn't sit right. He had a bad feeling about this job. "And if something goes wrong?" he asked, testing the waters. "Then we both die," she answered flatly, as if the thought didn't bother her at all. Jace felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was a dangerous job, yes, but the price was too good to turn down. He had a family to feed, and if this job went, well, it would set him up for a long time. But the warning bells in his head grew louder. Something wasn't right, and he knew it. He had no choice but to follow through. He had already made the deal. To back out now would be worse than just finishing the job. "Fine. I'll do it," Jace said, his voice barely a whisper. The alien gave him a slight nod, and just as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished into the shadows. Jace stared after her, his thoughts a tangled mess. He turned and walked towards the back alley where his ship was parked. The job was simple enough. Get in, get the cargo, get out. Easy, right? As Jace climbed into the cockpit of his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He looked around the empty docking bay, but there was no one there. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the unease creeping up on him. He started the engines, and the ship hummed to life. With a deep breath, he guided the ship out of the bay and into the stars. The dark expanse of space stretched before him, endless and empty. The quiet hum of the ship was a small comfort as he flew toward the coordinates given to him. But as he approached the location, something caught his eye, a small blip on his radar. It wasn't on his course. He narrowed his eyes and adjusted the controls, steering the ship toward it. As he got closer, the blip grew larger. It wasn't just a rogue signal. It was a ship, and it was positioned in the exact spot where he was, supposed to deliver the cargo. Jace felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't right. He checked his communications, but the system was dead. No signals, no messages, just static. It was like he had been cut off from the world. The ship was ahead now, too close for comfort. The ship was big, much bigger than his, and the closer he got, the more his instinct screamed at him to turn around, but it was too late. As he moved closer, the ship suddenly came alive. Lights flashed on, and a loud buzzing sound echoed through his cockpit. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. His heart raced as he tried to make a move, but it was too late. Another ship, smaller and faster, locked onto his position. Weapons came online, and Jace knew then that he was caught in something much bigger than he could handle. The alien princess's secret. Jace's heart raced as his ship shook violently. He had barely escaped the grasp of the enemy ship, but the alien princess, whoever she was, had given him more than just a job. The weight of it all pressed on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He couldn't shake the image of her gold-hued skin, her violet eyes, and the way she carried herself, like she owned everything around her. But there was something more to her, something hidden beneath that cold exterior. He hadn't known it then, but he was about to find out. His ship veered into a nearby asteroid field, the rocks passing by in a blur of sharp, jagged edges. The pressure in his chest didn't subside. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. The coordinates she'd given him led him to the edges of known space. It was remote, desolate, and beyond the reach of most space authorities. Jace had made plenty of dangerous deliveries, but never like this. There was something about the princess, something that tugged at him, pulling him deeper into the heart of danger. He gripped the controls tightly, the ship's lights flickering as his comms came to life with static. The communication system crackled, cutting through the silence of space. Jace froze. A voice, soft yet urgent, broke through the crackling noise. "Jace, are you there?" It was her, the alien princess. He hadn't expected to hear from her so soon. His pulse quickened, and he tapped the comms on. "I'm here," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice that answered him was different this time. It wasn't the calm, measured tone she had used earlier. There was fear in her voice now, and for the first time since meeting her, Jace wondered if she wasn't as in control as she appeared. "I need you to trust me," she said, her voice shaking. "We don't have much time. You need to go off course. Immediately." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Why? What's going on?" She hesitated, the silence between them heavy. He could feel it, the tension building. The silence made him uneasy, but he waited for her to speak. "I didn't tell you everything," she finally confessed, her voice trembling with an edge of panic. "My life is in danger, Jace, more than you know. I'm not just any alien royalty, I'm the heir to a throne, and that's why they're hunting me." Jace's brow furrowed. "Wait, hold on. You're telling me that you're royalty? What does that have to do with me?" She let out a shaky breath. "Everything. I'm supposed to marry someone from a rival species to secure an alliance, but I've already chosen someone else, someone I can't have. You." Jace felt the world tilt beneath him. His hand slipped from the controls, his mind racing. "You? You've chosen me? But why?" Before he could finish, a warning light blinked on his control panel. A sharp beep echoed through the cockpit, and Jace's eyes snapped to the screen. Another ship appeared on his radar, much larger and much closer than before. "Their ships are here," she whispered urgently, the fear in her voice cutting through him. "You have to turn back. Don't follow the original course. Do it now. They'll kill us both if they find us." Jace's breath quickened as he fought to steady the ship. His hands gripped the controls, and he pushed the throttle forward, making a sharp turn toward an uncharted sector of space. The larger ship loomed on the radar, its engines roaring as it closed in on his position. His pulse raced. "How do you know this? How do you know they're after you?" "I overheard them," she replied, her voice soft but urgent. "I found out that they want to use me as a pawn in their game. They'll stop at nothing to have me married off to the highest bidder. If I refuse, they'll kill me and destroy my entire family." Jace felt a pang of disbelief. This wasn't just some shady deal anymore. This was real. This was a war between powerful forces, and he was caught in the middle. "So what am I supposed to do? Run? Hide?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "If you can. But you're not just saving me, you're saving yourself too. Because if they catch us, they won't stop. They'll come for both of us, and they'll never stop hunting you." Jace's mind raced. He had never signed up for any of this. He had been just another smuggler, doing the dirty work for the highest bidder. But now he was caught up in something far bigger than himself. As he sped deeper into uncharted space, the asteroid field seemed to open up before him, the rocks parting like a wall. But it wasn't enough. The larger ship was closing in fast. His ship's engines groaned under the pressure as he pushed them to their limit. He glanced at the radar once more and saw that the enemy ship was now directly behind him. "I don't know if I can outrun them," Jace muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "You can," she said, her voice full of raw determination. "You have to. They can't catch us, Jace. Not if we fight. You need to hold on for a little longer." Jace pushed the throttle down harder, knowing the princess was right. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the only person who had ever trusted him, and perhaps for a future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. As his ship plunged deeper into the unknown, Jace's grip tightened on the controls. His pulse raced with the weight of the decision ahead. This was no longer just about money or escape. This was about something that felt like destiny. With the enemy ship just behind him, Jace didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was clear. He wasn't backing down now. Trapped in the enemy's lair, Jace's pulse hammered in his chest as the ship tore through the vast expanse of uncharted space. The asteroid field had been nothing more than a brief reprieve, and now, as the large enemy ship loomed ever closer behind him, the reality of the situation was sinking in. The stakes were no longer just about survival. They were about something far more dangerous, something that made his blood run cold. He glanced at the monitor once more, watching as the enemy ship's silhouette grew larger with every second. It was sleek, black, and menacing, like a predatory beast closing in on its prey. He was being hunted, not just by cold, calculating mercenaries, but by a powerful force, an enemy that was relentless. The princess's life and his own were in their hands now. "Jace, please listen to me," came the princess's voice, calm yet urgent. "You need to take a sharp left and follow my new coordinates. I'll guide you from here." His hands shook as he maneuvered the controls, sweat slicking his palms. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when everything was so close to unraveling. He had no idea who these people were or why they wanted to capture the princess, but he couldn't ignore the fear in her voice. It was real, and it sent a chill down his spine. With no other choice, he followed her instructions, veering hard, left as her coordinates flashed onto the screen. The ship jolted and his heart skipped a beat. The proximity alarms began to wail as the enemy ship closed in, its engines roaring behind him. "You're not going to make it," she said. Her words were heavy with finality. "We're running out of time." Jace's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" he demanded, desperation slipping into his voice. "Their tracking systems are too advanced. They can follow us, anywhere. And unless we can get to the hidden base on the outer rim, we're dead." Jace's mind raced. A hidden base on the outer rim? How had she known about it? It sounded like a place straight out of a war story. A refuge for the desperate, the ones who had nowhere else to go. He didn't care how she knew about it, but he did care about one thing. They were running out of options. Just as he was about to reply, a sharp noise echoed through the cockpit. A loud thud. The ship rocked violently, throwing him against the controls. His stomach lurched as the force of the impact slammed him back into his seat. He barely managed to regain control as the ship shuddered, the alarm lights flashing in, a chaotic dance. "Hold on." The princess's voice cracked through the comms, shaking. "We've been hit. They've breached the outer shields." Jace's breath came in ragged gasps. He could feel his heart in his throat. The shield had already taken heavy damage, and now the pressure was rising. He glanced at the display. A red flashing warning sign was blinking at him. Hull breach detected. His hand shot forward, trying to stabilize the ship as the outer atmosphere began to pour in. The ship groaned under the strain, and for a split second, Jace thought they might not make it, but then he remembered something. The hidden base. "Tell me where it is," he spat, his voice low and urgent, pushing aside the panic clawing at his chest. "Not far. she replied quickly. If you can survive this, just follow the coordinates I'm sending. I'll guide you through. Her words gave him no comfort. She was as scared as he was, maybe more so, but there was no time to dwell on that. No time for questions. His hands flew across the control panel as he adjusted the thrusters, trying to increase speed while keeping the ship intact. Outside the window, Jace could see the enemy ship drawing closer. Its shape loomed like a dark shadow in the distance, an inevitable fate that was rapidly approaching. Suddenly, the comms crackled again, this time with an unfamiliar voice. Cold, commanding. Turn off your engines, human, the voice barked, a metallic edge to its tone. You are surrounded. Your attempt at escape is futile. Jace's blood froze. It was a threat. A direct, unambiguous threat, and in that moment he knew the enemy wasn't just hunting the princess. They were hunting both of them. This wasn't just about a royal bloodline. It was about silencing anyone who stood in their way. Jace, listen to me. The princess's voice broke in, more frantic now. You need to follow the next set of coordinates and we'll make it to the base, but you have to trust me. Trust me, please. His heart raced as he scanned the control panel. The ship's shields were almost gone, and the enemy was closing. And the pursuit was relentless. But somehow he found a flicker of hope in her words. If they could just make it to that base. Maybe, just maybe, they could escape. With the enemy ship just behind him, he followed the coordinates she sent, making sharp turns through the asteroid field to confuse their sensors. The base was supposed to be close, but it felt like the universe was working against him. Every move he made seemed to bring them closer to death. Then, with a violent jolt, the ship lurched forward, sending Jace's body slamming into the controls again. He heard a loud pop and felt the ship shudder beneath him. His eyes widened as he realized the source of the jolt. The enemy ship had fired directly at them. They were in full pursuit. Jace, you have to get to the base now. The princess cried out, her voice now trembling with fear. We're almost there, but they're not far behind. The weight of the situation crashed down on him. He was out of time, out of options. There was only one way forward. He gripped the controls, determined to fight until his last breath. The base was near. The princess was counting on him. There was no turning back. But as the enemy ship bore down on them, Jace realized that whatever happened next, they were no longer just trying to escape. They were fighting for their lives, and for the future that was rapidly slipping away. A night that changes. Everything Jace's hands gripped the ship's controls like a lifeline, his knuckles white against the sleek, cold surface. His heart was pounding, the steady thrum of his pulse in his ears, almost drowning out the sounds of the battle outside. The stars blurred past as the ship shot through space, the enemy ship's weapons narrowly missing him with each twist and turn. His breath was shallow, quick, his mind racing as he calculated his next move. But then came the voice. The princess's voice, now quieter, almost a whisper. Jace, we can't outrun them much longer. Her words cut through him like a knife. He could hear the weariness in her voice, the fear that had only grown since their escape. The adrenaline from the chase was wearing thin, and reality was sinking in. He couldn't keep running forever. He glanced over his shoulder at the rapidly approaching enemy ship, a monstrous dark silhouette in the void. They had already taken several hits to the hull, and their weapons were barely functioning. They couldn't survive much longer if they stayed in the open. Jace didn't respond right away. Instead, his eyes flicked to the coordinates she had sent him earlier. The hidden base, his only hope of saving them both, was still too far away, and every time he tried to maneuver the ship out of danger, another blast rang out. The princess wasn't wrong. He needed a plan. He needed time. We can't keep this up, Jace said finally, his voice rough. If we don't make it to the base in the next 5 minutes, we're finished. The princess's reply was soft but firm. Then we make our own plan. I know a place where we can lay low, but we'll have to be careful. If they catch us, there's no escaping. He felt a sense of urgency ripple through him. Where is it? Tell me now. She hesitated, then spoke. It's an abandoned station on the outer ring near the black hole. It's off the grid, hidden from any scanner. But Jace, We have to get there quickly. It's a risk, but it's the only chance we have. Jace's mind spun. The outer ring, a lawless part of space where only the most dangerous people dared to go. A black hole? The risks were astronomical. But he knew this was the only option. It was either go to this station or face certain death at the hands of their pursuers. Then we're going there, he said, his tone decisive. Buckle up. He slammed, the throttle forward, pushing the ship's engines to the limit. The ship jolted forward, a sudden burst of speed taking them deeper into the unknown. They were now running on pure instinct. Every move felt like a gamble. The stars streaked past, them nothing but tiny flashes of light in the dark, cold void of space. But the enemy wasn't far behind. Jace could feel the weight of their presence, their relentless pursuit. They wouldn't give up easily. As they approached the black hole's orbit, Jace noticed something odd. The dark, swirling mass of the black hole wasn't just a gravitational anomaly. It was alive with movement, pulsing with an energy that he couldn't explain. It was a reminder that they weren't just escaping danger, they were hurtling toward the unknown, where even the most advanced technology might not be able to protect them. Jace had no choice but to press on, the pressure building as they neared the station. The quiet hum of the ship seemed to echo in his ears as he tried to focus. His hands were slick with sweat, his breath quick, the fear crawling up his spine. "This is it," the princess said, her voice now almost a whisper. "Once we pass the event horizon, there's no going back." Jace's heart skipped a beat. The event horizon, the point of no return, where nothing, not even light, could escape. He wasn't sure what the black hole would do to their ship, but he knew they couldn't afford to turn back now. They were too close. He pushed the ship forward, angling it carefully toward the invisible line of the event horizon. His hands trembled as he manipulated the controls. The ship groaned under the pressure, the outer shields flickering dangerously. He stole a quick glance at the radar. The enemy ship was still there, hovering just behind them. They were running out of time. The base was almost within reach, but the threat of being caught was real and it was closing in fast. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared, and Jace's eyes shot to the screen. It was a warning. The enemy ship had just fired another round. This time, they were closer. "Brace for impact," he yelled. The ship rocked violently as the blast hit. The force sent Jace flying into the controls, his head slamming against the side of the cockpit. For a moment, everything went black. His vision swam as he regained consciousness, his body aching from the impact. "Jace." The princess's voice was weak, but her urgency cut through the fog of his mind. "Jace, are you okay?" He shook his head, trying to clear the haze. Yeah, I'm good." He quickly checked the controls, his hands moving on their own as he tried to stabilize the ship. The damage was worse than he had anticipated. The outer shield was down and their systems were failing. He only had a few minutes before they were sitting ducks. "Get ready," Jace said, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "We're almost there." With one final push, he maneuvered the ship toward the station. As they passed through, the gravitational pull of the black hole, everything around them warped. Time itself seemed to stretch, bending and warping under the immense pressure. The ship's lights flickered wildly, and for a moment Jace couldn't tell if they were moving forward or sideways. The station finally appeared on the radar, a flickering silhouette in the distance. It was old, abandoned, and barely visible among the swirling dark matter that surrounded it. Jace knew they had just seconds to make it inside. "This is it," the princess whispered, her voice barely audible. "If we don't make it in now, we're lost." Jace pushed the throttle as hard as he could, aiming for the small docking port that barely registered on the radar. The enemy ship was almost on top of them now, the laser fire lighting up the dark expanse around them. With one final desperate move, Jace steered the ship into the docking port, barely avoiding the enemy ship's blasts. The ship hit the station's wall with a jarring crash, sending a violent shudder through the vessel, but they were inside. Jace slumped in his seat, exhausted, his mind spinning from the close call. But as he looked up at the princess, he saw something in her eyes, a look of relief, of hope. They had made it. But they weren't safe yet. The night was far from over, and the enemy wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. The silence in the ship was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the dying engines. Jace knew that the next move could be their last. The chase through the galaxy. Jace's breath came in ragged bursts as he staggered through the cold, dimly lit corridors of the abandoned space station. His body ached from the crash landing, his mind racing to process the chaos that had just unfolded. They had made it inside, but at what cost? The ship was barely intact, their pursuers still out there, and the clock was ticking. His fingers grazed the walls, still feeling the tremors of the failed escape. He could hear the princess's soft steps behind him, but the silence between them was deafening. They were alive for now, but survival didn't come with guarantees. The enemy was out there, circling like a hungry predator, and they would stop at nothing to track them down. "Jace, we don't have much time," the princess said, her voice laced with urgency. "We can't stay here. This station is already on their radar. We need to get to the control room." Jace turned to face her, his eyes narrowed with determination. "Control room? What good is that going to do? We don't have a way to fight them off." She met his gaze, her violet eyes flashing with a quiet, unwavering resolve. "We don't have to fight them. We just need to buy enough time to make the jump to the outer rim. The station's old, but it has a cloaking device. If we can get it online, they won't be able to find us." Her words hit him like a sudden wave of clarity. Cloaking device. Of course. He had nearly forgotten about the station's hidden features. An ancient relic of a long-dead war. It was their best chance, their only chance. But there was a problem. Getting to the control room won't be easy. "The station systems are shot," Jace said, running a hand through his hair. "We need to move quickly, but we can't risk getting caught by their search teams." She nodded, her face steely with resolve. "I know, but I have a plan. You just need to trust me." Jace hesitated, his mind racing with doubts, but in the end he had no choice. He had already trusted her with his life. Now wasn't the time to turn back. "Lead the way," he said, his voice firm. The princess turned sharply and led him down a narrow hallway, her steps quick and purposeful. Jace followed, each footstep echoing in the silent station. They passed through darkened corridors, the walls lined with rusted doors and forgotten machinery. The air was thick with the smell of old metal, the weight of abandonment hanging heavy in the stale air. Every step felt like a countdown, the tension in the air almost palpable. The ship outside had taken them to the edge of safety, but now, trapped in this ancient station, they were no better than sitting ducks. The enemy ship was still out there, hovering in orbit, waiting for the slightest sign of their location. As they approached the control room's entrance, Jace's pulse quickened. He could hear the faint hum of the station's failing systems, the occasional spark of electricity lighting up the darkness. It was a miracle they'd made it this far without being detected, but it wouldn't last long. They were on borrowed time. The princess reached out, pressing her palm to a panel next to the control room's door. There was a faint flicker of light, followed by a low mechanical whine. The door groaned and slowly slid open, revealing a darkened room filled with ancient consoles and flashing lights. Jay stepped inside, his eyes scanning the dim interior. It was a mess of tangled wires and outdated technology, barely functional after years of neglect. The cloaking device was supposed to be here somewhere, hidden among the broken remnants of this forgotten outpost. The princess didn't hesitate. She moved swiftly to the central console, her hands flying over the controls as she powered up the systems. The room flickered to life as the screens illuminated, casting an eerie glow across the space. "Is this it?" Jace asked, his voice low, his eyes darting to the screens. "Almost," she replied, her voice steady, but Jace could hear the strain beneath it. She was pushing the station's systems beyond their limits, trying to force it to do something it wasn't designed to do in centuries. "I just need a few more minutes." Jace took a step closer, his eyes scanning the readouts on the screens. The enemy ship was still out there, its sensors sweeping the station's vicinity. They were close, too close. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead as the seconds ticked by. Each passing moment brought them closer to being found. 5 more minutes, she murmured under her breath, her fingers moving with a desperation that mirrored his own. Jace glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see shadows moving through the corridors. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the soft clicking of the princess's fingers against the keys. But the stillness didn't last. A sudden flash of light erupted from the screens, followed by a shrill alarm. "We've been spotted," the princess said, her voice clipped. "They've found us." Jace's heart dropped. He spun on his heel, eyes darting to the door. He could hear the sound of boots echoing through the hallway. The enemy was closing in. "No time," he muttered. "We need to go now." He grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the back of the room. They didn't have a choice. The station's defenses were ancient and they were running out of options. "Not yet," she said, her voice tense with urgency. "Just give me one more minute. If I can get the cloaking device online, we can disappear. But I need to finish this." Jace froze. He knew the risks. The enemy was already too close, and every second counted. But he also knew the reality. They wouldn't survive without the cloaking device. "Do it," he growled, looking at her with a fierce determination. The princess hesitated, then nodded, focusing all her attention back on the console. Her fingers moved faster than ever, the air thick with the weight of time slipping away. Jace's eyes flicked to the door, his senses on high alert. He could feel them closing in. He could almost hear their footsteps now, heavy, deliberate. "They were coming. Please," he muttered under his breath. The seconds felt like hours as he watched her work. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then finally there was a soft beep, followed by the sound of the entire station shuddering. The lights flickered and went dark. "Done," she said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. "It's online. We're invisible." Jace stood, still for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The room around them was quiet, the air thick with the weight of their survival. But it wasn't over yet. The danger wasn't gone. The enemy was still out there. And now, with the cloaking device active, they were hidden. But for how long? Jace turned to the princess, his eyes locking with hers. They weren't out of danger yet, but they had bought themselves a brief moment of respite. The price of freedom. The silence was suffocating. Jace sat in the dim light of the abandoned control room, his eyes scanning the now black screens in front of him. His body was tense, every muscle coiled with the weight of what had just happened. The cloaking device was active, but there was no comfort in it, no safety. The station was cloaked from enemy sensors, hidden in plain sight among the stars, but they weren't safe. Not yet. They had only bought themselves a temporary escape. The princess, standing across from him, was equally still. Her eyes, usually full of determination, now seemed clouded with doubt. The fear he had seen earlier had crept back into her expression, and despite the silence between them, he could sense the weight of her thoughts, the burden of her past that was too heavy to ignore. Jace leaned back in his chair, the groan of the old station's metal under his weight doing little to break the tension. His mind was racing, torn between the relief of survival and the bitter reality of their situation. The enemy was still out there. Their sensors would eventually pick up the faintest traces of the station's energy signature. Their time was limited. "We can't stay here forever," Jace finally spoke, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but there was an edge to it. "Eventually they'll find us. This station, it's falling apart. We're barely holding it together." The princess didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was locked on the floor, her fingers nervously fidgeting with a piece of old equipment. The tension in the room was thick, but the weight of her next words would shift everything. "I know," she whispered, "but I can't go back to where I was. I can't be forced into that marriage, into a life of control and pain. I've seen what it does to people, Jace. The power they have, it's not just political, it's—" She trailed off, her voice heavy with a truth she was only now beginning to confront. Jace felt the shift in her tone. The walls she had built around herself, The ice she had wrapped her heart in to protect herself from the dangers of her world were starting to crack. He could feel the weight of her vulnerability, the truth buried beneath the layers of nobility and secrecy. "You don't have to go back," Jace said softly, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "I'm not going to let them take you. We'll find another way, we'll make it work. But you need to trust me and trust yourself." Her eyes lifted to meet his. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, as if the universe had narrowed down to just the two of them, two people caught in a storm trying to figure out how to weather it. "I've trusted you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And every time I do, the stakes get higher." Jace stood up, his gaze fixed on her. "I didn't ask for any of this. Hell, I didn't even want to get involved. But now, you're right. The stakes are high. But what's the alternative? Giving up and letting them control us? Letting them decide our futures for us?" Her silence spoke volumes. She was struggling with the weight of what was ahead, of what they were about to face. She wasn't the only one. "You're not alone in this," he added, his voice growing stronger. "I won't let you be alone in this." The air between them was electric, thick with the tension of everything they'd been through and the uncertainty of what was to come. Jace's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear. He couldn't afford to lose her, not now. Not when they were so close to freedom. "We need a plan," he continued, his eyes scanning the darkened station. "We have to move. We can't stay here. I don't know how long the cloaking device will hold up. We need to get to the outer rim to where we can disappear. I have some contacts there, people who might be able to help us." The princess stepped closer, her eyes narrowed in thought. She seemed to be weighing his words, considering them carefully. "How do we get there?" she asked. "The station's not functional enough for a long-distance jump." Jace's jaw clenched. He knew the answer, but it wasn't a good one. "We take the ship or what's left of it. I'll fix it, but we need to get out of here now." There was a long pause. She wasn't naive. She knew the risks involved. They were staring into the abyss of the unknown with nothing but broken pieces to put together. But what other choice did they have? "We can't go back," she said, her voice a quiet declaration. "Not to that life, not to that fate." Jace nodded, a sense of determination settling in his chest. "Then we fight for it. Together." Just then, the station's alarm system blared to life, cutting through the tense silence like a knife. A flashing red light illuminated the room, the sound of distant explosions rumbling through the walls. "They've found us," Jace muttered under his breath. The princess's eyes widened in shock. "No, they can't have. The cloaking device, it's been too long. Their technology is too advanced. They've been tracking us this whole time," Jace said, his mind spinning as he rushed toward the control panel. He hit a few buttons, and the screen blinked to life. What he saw made his stomach drop. The enemy fleet had arrived. Their ships, dark and imposing, were now hovering around the station. The princess was right. They had found them. "There's no time to waste. We have to move," Jace said, his voice urgent. "Now." The princess stepped forward, her eyes steely with resolve. "We'll fight back. We have no other choice." Jace's gaze met hers, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision. "We fight for freedom, or we die trying." He turned toward the exit, his mind racing through every possible move, every last chance they had. As he led the princess through the darkened corridors, he couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. The enemy was at their doorstep, and they were out of time. As they reached the ship, Jace's hands moved quickly, preparing the engines for takeoff. But there was no turning back now. Every system was in chaos, and the damage to the ship was worse than he'd hoped, but it didn't matter. They had one shot at survival. "Strap in," Jace called over his shoulder as he powered up the ship. "This is going to be a bumpy ride." The engines roared to life, and the ship's hull groaned under the strain. They were airborne now, but the enemy ships were closing in, ready to fire. The cold, vast expanse of space stretched out before them, an unforgiving battlefield. And as Jace pushed the throttle forward, the ship hurtling toward the unknown, He knew one thing for sure. The price of freedom had never been this high. They were running out of time, but they weren't going down without a fight. A love worth dying. For the ship's engines roared to life, a deafening sound that shook the hull and reverberated through Jace's bones. He tightened his grip on the controls, sweat beading on his forehead as he pushed the throttle to the max. The enemy ships were closing in, and with every passing second, the distance between life and death grew smaller. "Jace," the princess shouted from behind him. Her voice was strained, urgent. "They're locking onto us. We need to break free, now." Jace's fingers flew across the console, activating the ship's defensive shields and rerouting all available power to the engines. He could feel the pressure mounting. This was it, the final stand. If they didn't escape now, they'd be trapped, with nowhere to run, and the odds were against them. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The ship shuddered under the intense strain of the evasive maneuvers. He threw it into a hard roll, narrowly dodging a blast from the pursuing enemy ship. The attack hit their shields instead, sending a violent tremor through the vessel. But the shield held. For now. "We've got seconds," Jace muttered under his breath, pushing the ship to its limits. "Where's the escape route?" The princess's voice came through the comms, strained but determined. "Straight ahead. I've programmed a safe route through the asteroid belt on the far side of the system. It's the only way they won't be able to track us." Jace's jaw tightened as he aimed the ship towards the asteroid field. The stakes were higher than ever, and the ship was barely holding together. But he didn't have time to worry about that now. The princess had trusted him with her life, and he wasn't about to fail her. They were flying blind through a labyrinth of asteroids, each one a potential death trap, but it was their only chance. The enemy ships, while powerful, weren't as agile. They would hesitate to enter the dense asteroid field. But Jace had no intention of waiting to see if that hesitation would cost them their lives. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a swirling mass of rocks and debris. Jace's pulse quickened. He had to navigate this tight space at breakneck speed, but one wrong move, one missed turn, and they'd be dead. The ship jolted as another blast from the enemy hit the shields. A warning light flashed on the console. Shields were at 40%. His heart raced. They didn't have much left. "We're almost there," the princess cried, her voice filled with a mix of hope and fear. Jace's hands gripped the controls tighter, sweat dripping down his face as he concentrated. The asteroid field was closing in fast, the rocks growing larger with every second. The narrow gaps between them seemed impossibly small. The ship's engines roared in protest as he pushed it. To the edge of its capacity, his eyes locked on the opening ahead. "Stay with me," he shouted over the roar of the ship. "We're not done yet." With a swift motion, Jace yanked the controls to the right, weaving the ship through a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. The ship shuddered as the hull scraped dangerously, close to the rock. But it wasn't over. A blast from the enemy ship slammed into the side of their vessel, causing the ship to spin violently. Jace's stomach lurched as he fought to regain control, his fingers moving with the precision of a man who had done this 100 times before. But the ship was slowing, the engines whining under the pressure. They had taken too much damage. "We're losing power," the princess shouted, her voice cracking with panic. "We need to get out of here." Jace's heart pounded as he looked at the fuel gauge. Barely a quarter of a tank left. They were running out of time, and the asteroid field was becoming even more dangerous. He had to make a decision. "Hold on tight," Jace muttered, his mind racing. With no other option, he took a deep breath and slammed the controls forward. The ship rocketed forward, hurtling through the asteroid field at breakneck speed. Rocks and debris shot past them like bullets, narrowly missing the ship's fragile frame. The enemy was still right behind them, but they couldn't keep up in the asteroid field. Jace could hear the explosions of the enemy's weapons hitting the outer layers of the ship. But with every evasive move, they gained ground. The gap between life and death was closing, and Jace could feel it in every fiber of his being. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they would be obliterated. "Jace, I'm not gonna make it," the princess whispered suddenly, her voice barely audible. Jace glanced at her through the rear view mirror, his eyes hard with resolve. What are you talking about? Her eyes were soft, filled with a mixture of pain and peace. I'm not the princess they think I am, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't choose this life. I didn't choose the role they wanted me to play. I chose you. His heart skipped a beat as her words hit him like a thunderclap. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. What we're doing, Jace, it's the only choice we have. But I knew from the moment I met you that this is where I wanted to be. It's you. I trust you with my life. The words hung in the air like a promise, and for a fleeting moment Jace felt as though everything that had brought them here, every sacrifice, every moment of fear and hope, had led to this one truth. Her confession was the weight that grounded him, the lifeline that kept him from losing his way. I won't let you go, not now, Jace said firmly. We fight for this. We fight for each other. She nodded, her eyes locking with his, and, for the first time since their escape, a flicker of peace passed between them. But the danger wasn't gone. They were still deep within the asteroid field and the enemy was closing in fast. Hold tight, Jace shouted, his voice filled with a raw, desperate urgency. We're almost there. The asteroid field began to thin out, and ahead, a dark void waited, an empty space between the chaos and the unknown. Jace pushed the throttle harder, the ship shuddering under the strain. The final stretch, the last chance. They were almost free. Then a sudden explosion rocked the ship. A direct hit, the force threw them off course, spiraling toward a massive asteroid. The ground beneath them seemed to fall away as the ship was pulled into a chaotic, uncontrollable spin. Jace's hands flew across the controls, pulling hard to regain control. The enemy was right on their tail now, no more than a few miles away. And then, with one final, desperate push, Jace broke free of the asteroid field. The ship's nose pointed forward, and in the vast emptiness of space, they were free. Finally, free. The enemy ship fell behind them, helpless in the wake of the chaos. Jace slowed the ship, the sound of the engines now steady and familiar. But the victory was hollow. They had made it, barely. But at what cost? The ship was damaged beyond repair, their future uncertain. And yet, as he glanced at the princess, beside him something stirred deep inside him, a hope that despite everything they had a chance, a love worth dying for, and maybe, just maybe, it was worth living for too.